The conference room was buzzing with chatter as staffers, journalists, and curious onlookers milled about, adjusting cameras and shuffling papers. Jasmine Crockett walked in with a quiet confidence that immediately drew attention. She wasn't here to make small talk or play politics. She was here to dissect a pressing issue with clarity. Today's discussion focused on the mental health impact of social media on teens, a topic often dismissed or oversimplified. Across the room, a senior official leaned back, smirking as though the conversation would be an easy performance. He was used to audiences who laughed at his jokes and nodded at his generalizations. This time, however, he would meet someone prepared to challenge assumptions. Armed with facts, examples, and a calm presence that demanded attention. As Jasmine approached the podium, she allowed the room to settle into silence, letting the energy of anticipation build. She didn't rush. She didn't raise her voice. Instead, she began by sharing a story from a local high school, describing a teen who had spent hours online only to face anxiety and self-doubt. Amplified by algorithms that favored dramatic or negative content, her words painted a vivid picture, giving life to statistics that often felt abstract. The official snickered quietly, trying to undermine her credibility before she had even begun. He had this look of someone ready to dismiss her points with a wave and a laugh, certain that charm alone would sway the room. But Jasmine, undeterred, paused and looked directly at him, a subtle challenge in her gaze. She started with a question, simple and precise. Do you think our youth's experiences are irrelevant just because they are not adults? The room held its breath. The question was not accusatory, but deeply compelling, forcing everyone to consider the human dimension behind data and studies. It reframed the conversation immediately. What had begun as a typical briefing was now a moment of reflection. The laughter that had attempted to dominate the room faded, replaced by a tangible curiosity. People leaned forward, wanting to hear the next words, understanding that this discussion might go deeper than most panels. Jasmine didn't rely on theatrics. Her strength lay in clarity. She spoke about patterns observed in schools, highlighting how late-night scrolling and exposure to curated content affected sleep, self-esteem, and overall mental well-being. She referenced studies that showed correlations between excessive social media use and increased rates of anxiety and depression among teens. But she didn't stop at statistics. She described how online communities could both empower and harm, creating spaces where teens found support, yet also where negative feedback loops could form. Her approach was balanced, not accusatory, emphasizing the need to understand complexity rather than oversimplify. The official attempted to interject, claiming that social media was mostly harmless and emphasizing individual responsibility. He laughed again, as if the conversation were trivial, dismissing the subtle evidence Jasmine had presented. But she didn't react with anger. Instead, she leaned slightly forward and spoke with calm authority. She acknowledged the importance of personal responsibility, but expanded the frame. Responsibility matters. Yes, but context matters too. When platforms amplify harmful content, the burden is not solely on the user it is shared. Her tone was firm, yet measured, and her words shifted the energy in the room. People began to see that the debate wasn't about blame, but about understanding influence and accountability. Jasmine then shared examples from community organizations, where counselors noticed patterns of stress and social comparison among teens using social media late at night. She highlighted initiatives that had successfully helped students manage their online lives through awareness and structured guidance. Each anecdote reinforced her points, making abstract research tangible. It was clear she had done her homework, balancing real stories with broader context. The official, who had been ready to dominate the discussion with charm and humor, now seemed momentarily off balance. His smirk faded as he realized the audience was no longer fully on his side. Their attention had shifted toward Jasmine's carefully framed argument. Even the journalists in the room picked up on the shift. Cameras turned, pens paused mid-scribble, and the murmurs died down. Jasmine wasn't seeking applause. She was seeking engagement, and the room was responding. Her delivery was strategic. She paced her sentences, varied her tone, and asked questions that invited reflection rather than confrontation. The smirk on the official's face no longer held the same power. He could no longer simply charm the audience into agreement, because Jasmine had created a space for critical thinking. The focus was no longer on personalities, but on the issue itself, the mental and emotional health of teens navigating complex digital landscapes. By the time she finished this first section, Jasmine had established not only credibility but authority. She had transformed the atmosphere from casual amusement into focused attention. Her approach demonstrated that debate could be intelligent, fast-paced, and respectful, without resorting to attacks or theatrics. She had captured the audience's interest with real-life examples, precise questions, and calm persistence. The official's laughter had been neutralized, replaced with recognition that this would not be an easy conversation to steer. For the first time in the session, the room was silent, listening, engaged, and ready to follow where Jasmine's reasoning would take them next. This opening set the tone for what would become an insightful, thought-provoking discussion. Jasmine had not only positioned herself as a knowledgeable voice, but also shifted the momentum of the debate, proving that preparation, clarity, and respect could turn initial skepticism into genuine consideration. The first impression was decisive. The room understood that this was no ordinary panel, and the challenges presented would require more than casual dismissals. Jasmine Crockett had stepped up, and from that moment, the discussion had a new trajectory, one where facts, empathy, and reason would guide the conversation. The room was still charged with energy from Jasmine's opening statements. The initial tension created by the official's smirk and laughter had now shifted. People were leaning forward, eager to hear her next point, sensing that the discussion would not be superficial. Jasmine began to expand the conversation, moving beyond anecdotes to explore broader systemic factors influencing teen behavior online. She explained that while personal choice mattered, social media platforms were designed to maximize engagement, often exploiting human psychology. Algorithms prioritize sensational or emotionally charged content, creating cycles that kept teens scrolling late into the night, comparing themselves to idealized images and narratives. Her voice was calm but precise, each word chosen to build understanding without alienating anyone. She turned to the official directly, asking, "Can we honestly claim that users alone bear responsibility when systems are engineered to exploit their attention?" The room reacted immediately. Her question wasn't confrontational. It was incisive, forcing the official to reconsider his casual dismissal. He opened his mouth to respond, but she continued, layering her argument with data. She cited studies showing that teens who spent more than 3 hours a day on social media were significantly more likely to report symptoms of anxiety, depression, and disrupted sleep. She explained that this wasn't about blaming technology, but recognizing patterns that had real consequences on health and well-being. The audience began nodding subtly, following her logic. Realizing that the discussion was about solutions rather than fault-finding, Jasmine then illustrated the conversation with examples from schools and community programs. She described a counseling session where teens admitted feeling constant pressure to perform, to present themselves perfectly online, and to gain validation through likes and comments. She emphasized that this pressure was amplified by social comparison and public judgment, not by mere use of social media itself. Her storytelling made abstract concepts relatable. She didn't just list facts, she painted vivid mental pictures. The official, who had been ready to dominate the debate with casual charm, found himself navigating uncharted territory. He attempted a light joke, trying to regain control, but the room's energy no longer followed him. Jasmine's facts and stories had anchored the audience's attention on the real issues, making superficial humor ineffective. She didn't stop with consequences. She addressed potential solutions, emphasizing collaboration between parents, educators, and platforms. Jasmine explained that proactive measures like setting screen time limits, promoting digital literacy, and encouraging critical thinking were essential. She also mentioned that some platforms had begun experimenting with notifications too. Reduce late-night engagement and initiatives to highlight positive content over sensationalism. Each suggestion reinforced her earlier points, demonstrating that responsible digital use wasn't solely a personal choice, but a shared societal effort. Her approach was balanced, showing empathy for teens while holding platforms accountable. Allowing both perspectives to coexist in a productive debate, the official tried to interrupt, suggesting that parental oversight was sufficient and that teens should develop self-control. Jasmine acknowledged the point briefly, nodding to validate his perspective, then countered with a compelling question. If parental guidance were enough, why do statistics still show rising rates of anxiety and depression among teens despite increased awareness? The audience was silent for a moment, absorbing the weight of the question. Her tone was gentle yet firm, and it created a natural pause in the official's attempt to control the narrative. The shift was subtle but significant. Jasmine had reframed the conversation from one about personal blame to one about systemic responsibility, compelling the audience to think critically about the underlying factors affecting teen mental health. Jasmine continued by exploring how peer influence and online communities could serve as both support and stressors. She described instances where teens found solace in online groups, but also cases where toxic interactions exacerbated feelings of inadequacy. Her explanation highlighted nuance. Social media wasn't inherently harmful, but without guidance and context, risks increased. The official attempted to argue that teens were resilient and capable of managing these challenges on their own. Jasmine didn't dismiss his point. Instead, she reframed it, stating, "Resilience is important. But resilience alone cannot mitigate engineered systems designed to exploit vulnerabilities." Her calm, reasoned response turned his argument on its head without personal attacks. Reinforcing her credibility and deepening audience engagement, she then used visual aids and charts, showing trends over the past 5 years, linking screen time and reported stress levels. By combining narrative, research, and visuals, created a multi-layered argument that appealed to logic and emotion simultaneously. Her pacing was deliberate yet brisk, moving quickly between points to maintain momentum while ensuring clarity. Each example built on the previous one, creating a narrative thread that the audience could follow intuitively. The official grew visibly uncomfortable, realizing that laughter and charm could no longer mask the substance of her points. Every attempt he made to redirect the conversation was met with precise, evidence-based counters that further solidified Jasmine's position. As Part 2 drew toward its conclusion, Jasmine emphasized the importance of systemic solutions alongside personal responsibility. She argued for collaborative approaches involving educators, parents, policymakers, and technology companies. She stressed that while teens must develop self-awareness, society had a duty to create safer, healthier online environments. By framing the issue in terms of shared responsibility rather than assigning blame, she maintained balance while asserting her points effectively. The room, initially tense and skeptical, was now engaged, reflective, and attentive. The official's earlier attempts at humor had largely failed. Jasmine's facts, examples, and thoughtful questions had shifted the momentum decisively. The segment ended with a quiet pause, a moment for the audience to digest the implications. Jasmine had skillfully balanced empathy, authority, and intellect. She had highlighted multiple perspectives while guiding the discussion toward actionable insights. Part 2 demonstrated her ability to move from anecdotal evidence to systemic analysis, maintaining clarity and fast pace without repetition. The audience was now invested, not because of spectacle or confrontation, but because Jasmine had made the subject real, relatable, and urgent. She had taken what began as a casual debate and turned it into a meaningful exploration of responsibility, resilience, and societal obligation. The atmosphere had shifted entirely by the time Part 3 began. The audience, once merely curious, was now fully engaged, leaning forward to catch every word. Jasmine Crockett moved seamlessly from systemic analysis to practical implications, showing how her ideas could directly impact communities. She began by addressing the balance between freedom and responsibility, framing it as a question relevant to everyone, not just teens or educators. Freedom without guidance can become a double-edged sword, she said. Her tone was deliberate but energetic, carrying authority without condescension. The official attempted to interject, trying to assert that personal responsibility outweighed structural concerns, but Jasmine anticipated this. She paused, looked directly at him, and said, "I respect that viewpoint. But let's consider the environment shaping these choices. Are we equipping young people to handle it, or are we leaving them vulnerable?" The question landed like a hammer, reframing the discussion from individual blame to collective accountability. She illustrated her point with stories of real students navigating online spaces. She told of a high schooler, Emily, who spent hours on social media comparing herself to peers, her mood fluctuating with each like and comment. Emily's story was relatable, grounded in common experiences that the audience recognized instantly. Jasmine emphasized that Emily's struggles weren't about laziness or poor choices, but about a system designed to amplify comparison, anxiety, and distraction. She then contrasted this with another student, Marcus, who thrived online by using social media intentionally, engaging in educational groups, and connecting with supportive communities. By presenting both sides, Jasmine demonstrated that social media could be a tool for empowerment or stress, depending on how the environment and guidance intersected. The audience could see the nuance. It wasn't a binary debate. Jasmine moved quickly into the structural aspect, breaking down how online platforms are incentivized. She explained that algorithms prioritize content that triggers strong emotions. Jogger, Sangaroja. A BHS, Roby Kiss. Only Ruby Kiss has the luxurious texture. That excitement, envy because these increase engagement. Teenagers, with their developing brains and heightened emotional sensitivity, were particularly affected. She illustrated this with a chart showing peak usage hours, emotional reactions, and sleep disruption, linking these factors to mental health concerns. Her explanation was fast-paced but clear. She didn't dwell on one point for too long, maintaining momentum while layering her argument with evidence. Each fact reinforced the last, making it increasingly difficult for the official to interject. Without seeming dismissive of real-world consequences, the official attempted to pivot, suggesting that parental oversight and personal choice were sufficient to manage these risks. Jasmine acknowledged this perspective, nodding to validate it, then skillfully countered. Parental oversight is important, but even well-informed parents can't fully monitor 24/7 access. The system itself must be considered features, notifications. Endless feeds all designed to keep attention captive. Her delivery was precise, calm, and uncheckable, forcing the audience to weigh the structural dimension alongside personal responsibility. The official stuttered, attempting humor again to deflect tension, but the crowd's focus had shifted. They were now invested in Jasmine's reasoning. Her balance of empathy, data, and narrative made the official's charm ineffective. Jasmine then moved to practical solutions, keeping the discussion grounded. She outlined strategies that empowered teens while acknowledging systemic influences. Screen time guidelines, digital literacy programs, mental health resources in schools, and responsible platform design were all discussed. She emphasized that collaboration was crucial. Teens, parents, educators, policymakers, and tech companies needed to work together. By positioning solutions as cooperative rather than prescriptive, she avoided alienating the audience or the official. Each suggestion was illustrated with examples of communities where these strategies had produced measurable improvements. The fast pacing of her points kept the audience engaged while conveying depth and urgency, making the problem tangible and solvable simultaneously. Throughout Part 3, Jasmine's ability to connect micro-level experiences with macro-level systems became evident. She continuously tied individual stories back to broader societal patterns, making abstract concepts relatable. She described how teens' self-perception, academic performance, and interpersonal relationships were intertwined with digital habits, showing that small changes in environment could ripple outward. Her analysis never felt accusatory. It was solution-focused and reasoned, even when the official tried to downplay systemic factors. Jasmine's calm rebuttals, grounded in evidence, human stories, and careful logic kept the audience aligned with her reasoning. Each response was concise yet layered, maintaining the fast pace without losing clarity. As Part 3 neared its close, Jasmine brought the discussion full circle, emphasizing the balance between empowerment and protection. She reminded the audience that teens were resilient but not invulnerable. That personal responsibility was critical but insufficient without thoughtful systemic design. She returned to her opening question, reframing it to encapsulate the broader lesson. How do we create spaces where freedom is meaningful, where choice is informed, and where support is available when challenges arise? The room remained silent for a beat, absorbing the weight of her words. Her pacing had kept the discussion brisk, yet every point landed with clarity and impact. The officials' attempts to regain control had largely failed. The momentum had shifted decisively in Jasmine's favor. The audience's reaction was subtle but telling: nodding heads, attentive eyes, and reflective silence. They had been led from individual anecdotes to systemic patterns, from abstract principles to concrete solutions, all within a coherent, fast-paced narrative. Jasmine's storytelling had combined empathy, authority, and clarity, making the conversation about shared responsibility rather than blame. By the end of Part 3, it was clear that she had not only dismantled the oversimplified arguments, but also reframed the entire debate around balance, nuance, and actionable insight. The stage was now set for the final part, where her conclusions would resonate and inspire further reflection, ensuring that the audience left with both understanding and practical considerations. As Part 4 began, the energy in the room had shifted completely. The audience, initially passive observers, was now deeply engaged, hanging on every word Jasmine Crockett spoke. The earlier attempts at interruption and humor from the official had faded, replaced by an almost palpable tension. Jasmine capitalized on this momentum, moving decisively from analysis to actionable insight. She knew that the conversation needed closure, a synthesis of the nuanced points she had carefully laid out in Part 3, while still keeping the pace quick and the language accessible. She started by revisiting the central question: how could society balance individual freedom with structural responsibility in an era dominated by digital influence? Without pausing unnecessarily, she drew a clear line connecting systemic issues, personal responsibility, and societal outcomes. Jasmine highlighted the consequences of inaction with compelling clarity. She described communities where digital literacy programs were scarce, where teens had unrestricted access to online platforms without guidance, and where anxiety, depression, and distraction were rampant. Each example was concrete and relatable: a student skipping meals to scroll through feeds, another unable to focus in class because constant notifications had fragmented attention. a teenager overwhelmed by misinformation. These stories were not sensationalized, but presented as real challenges, demonstrating the tangible effects of structural design combined with personal choice. Her delivery was fast-paced, but each sentence was carefully structured, balancing urgency with clarity. The audience could immediately connect these examples to their own experiences or those of people they knew, which made her argument compelling and personal. Next, Jasmine turned toward solutions, but she did so strategically, emphasizing that effective change required collaboration. She underscored the importance of parental engagement while recognizing that parents alone could not manage the scale and complexity of digital life. Schools had a critical role, but so did communities, policymakers, and technology companies. She pointed out that thoughtful design choices by social media platforms, such as algorithm transparency, time limit features, and content moderation, could make an enormous difference. By framing solutions as a shared responsibility, she avoided placing blame on any single group while showing that proactive steps were both realistic and necessary. This balanced approach reinforced her credibility. She wasn't merely criticizing, she was providing a roadmap for action, as the official attempted to interject again, suggesting that individual choice was paramount and systemic influence secondary. Jasmine remained composed. She allowed him a brief moment, but then steered the discussion back to the audience, addressing their likely questions and concerns. She framed it in a way that validated differing opinions. Choice is essential, yes, but how can we truly make informed decisions when the environment is skewed to exploit impulses? A teen choosing to spend hours online isn't acting in a vacuum. This phrasing subtly reframed the debate, shifting attention from individual blame to shared responsibility without diminishing personal agency. Her tone remained calm and confident, preventing any escalation while still making the point powerfully. The room was visibly responsive. Heads nodded in agreement, pens scribbled notes, and murmurs of reflection circulated. Jasmine then wove together individual narratives with structural analysis, reinforcing her earlier points in a dynamic, fast-moving sequence. She recounted Emily's and Marcus's stories, but this time highlighted the actionable differences: how support systems, educational programs, and intentional use of technology could shift outcomes. She emphasized that one teen's success didn't negate another's struggle, but illustrated the potential of combined personal and systemic strategies. Each example was concise, yet layered with nuance, keeping the pace brisk while ensuring clarity. Her audience could now see the full spectrum: challenges, variables, and solutions all interlinked. The debate was no longer abstract. It had become concrete, immediate, and emotionally resonant. Building on this, Jasmine addressed potential criticisms directly. She acknowledged that tech companies were often profit-driven, that schools faced budget constraints, and that parental oversight varied widely. Yet, she framed these challenges as opportunities rather than excuses. Policies could encourage responsible platform design. Community programs could supplement educational gaps, and digital literacy could become a foundational part of curricula. Her language was simple but strategic, making the solutions seem attainable without oversimplifying the complexity. This part of her argument reinforced the earlier message. The problem was multifaceted, and the response had to be equally layered. The officials' repeated attempts to deflect had little effect. Her rapid-fire synthesis of problems, consequences, and solutions made his interjections seem incomplete, almost superficial in comparison. Towards the climax of Part 4, Jasmine shifted to a call to action that was both urgent and inclusive. She addressed the audience directly, inviting reflection and participation. Think about your own digital habits. Think about the teens in your life. How can we all contribute to spaces where freedom is meaningful, informed, and safe? Her voice carried authority but also warmth, bridging the gap between analytical reasoning and emotional engagement. She made the audience feel responsible, empowered, and capable of contributing to solutions. Each sentence built on the last, creating momentum that was both rapid and coherent, leaving no room for distraction or doubt. By this point, the room was fully aligned with her narrative. The debate reframed around collaboration, understanding, and practical steps forward. Finally, Jasmine concluded by tying the discussion back to a broader societal principle: balance. She reiterated that freedom, responsibility, and systemic support were interdependent. She reminded the audience that no single solution would suffice, but that incremental steps taken collectively could create meaningful change. The pacing remained brisk, each point layered efficiently, ensuring clarity without redundancy. Her conclusion resonated because it integrated narrative, data, and actionable insight, leaving the audience with both knowledge and practical motivation. The officials' earlier attempts to dominate the conversation had been neutralized. Jasmine's rapid, structured reasoning had shifted the momentum entirely. As the audience reflected, it was evident that the discussion had evolved from confrontation to comprehension, from debate to understanding, leaving a lasting impression of thoughtful, engaged dialogue. By the end of Part 4, the room was silent but energized. The audience left with a nuanced appreciation of the interplay between individual choice and systemic influence. Jasmine had transformed a potentially contentious debate into a productive conversation, offering insight, practical guidance, and emotional resonance. Every story, example, and argument had been woven into a fast-paced, coherent narrative that reinforced critical thinking and shared responsibility. The debate was no longer about winning or losing. It was about understanding, collaboration, and the tangible steps each person could take to create a healthier digital and social environment.